Joining us now is Tia Mitchell, Washington bureau chief for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Courtney Brown, senior economics reporter for Axios. Courtney, I want to start with you. What are the key takeaways from this minutes? Break it down for us, this split that we're seeing in the Fed.
We don't have drama at the Federal Reserve. It's not a thing that happens, but here we are. We have some drama. We have some disagreements at the Federal Reserve over how much more they can lower borrowing costs in 2026. We found out from the minutes yesterday that there was some disagreement among top officials, and that just doesn't happen a lot. That vote that happened earlier this month, to cut interest rates by a quarter percentage point, that was the most disagreement we'd seen at the Fed since 2019. So you can imagine that going into 2026, the Fed has a big question on its hands. Some of its officials say we need to keep lowering rates to protect the job market. Other officials say, actually, inflation is a bigger problem and we need to hold off for a little bit longer.
I mean, is it normal to have that much disagreement in the Fed? Why does it matter?
It matters because we are getting a new Fed chair in 2026. At this particular moment, the president is calling for the Fed to cut interest rates. We have no reporting at all that suggests that the Fed is, bowing to that pressure. But what we know is that Trump is probably going to install a loyalist. Mm-hmm. And we know that Fed officials are maybe not going to follow along with that. And I think that's just unsettling for financial markets to know that at the Fed, this very important institution, there is huge disagreement about the direction of policy. It creates more uncertainty that financial markets don't like.
Tia, Courtney's talking about that pressure from the president, and these minutes paint a picture of all of that, the pressure that Fed Chair Jerome Powell is facing with the economy's well-being partially on his shoulders. What are we hearing from the president, and how much that pressure is at play here?
I mean, the president has made it clear he wants the Fed to continue to cut interest rates. He thinks that will drive economic growth. I think he also believes that will offset some of the concerns about affordability. If, interest rates come down, they make buying a home more affordable, they make financing other types of investments more affordable. So because there is so much pressure on the Fed, I think that is kind of one of the byproducts is that the disagreements that are happening among governors. Of course, we're seeing it in many other places of politics in the government where we know the Trump pressure campaign puts people who want to be loyal to him, who generally are inclined to give him what he wants, but it may come against their professional judgment or their maybe decisions they would have made otherwise. Then that creates a conflict.
Courtney, what do you think is going to happen when the Fed decides on the interest rate decision next month?
So we learned from the minutes that there was kind of this grand bargain, if you will, that some officials who didn't want to go along with an interest rate cut would go along with it, but they wanted Chair Powell at the press conference to convey that future interest rate cuts were not a given. And that's exactly what happened. And we learned in the minutes that there are some officials who say that interest rates should stay on hold for some time until there is clear evidence that inflation is coming down in a sustainable way. And so it's really difficult to say what happens next year because so much is in the air with respect to White House policy when it comes to trade, when it comes to tariffs. Will there be more inflationary pressures from the White House? We don't know. And I think there's also so many questions about the future of economic data, especially coming off this long government shutdown blackout that we had. I think Fed officials have said that they're concerned that the labor market data maybe is not telling the whole story for statistical reasons or what have you. So I think there are a lot of questions, and there is this want to kind of just chill out for a little bit and see what the economic data reveals.
Interest rates, tariffs, the cost of groceries, the cost of electricity. Tia, what are you watching for in the new year when it comes to the economy and how the president will handle that as it relates to the midterms and these high stakes races that we're watching, especially in the state that you cover, Georgia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, Democrats have made it clear that affordability is going to continue to be their calling card. And it comes down to different pockets of interest, whether we're talking about healthcare costs, we're talking about safety net programs like SNAP and Medicaid and Medicare, where we're talking about, even subsidies for farmers and disaster aid. I think they're going to apply the affordability theme to just about everything in an attempt to kind of call into question President Donald Trump's policies and how that affects, the cost of goods when people go to the grocery store. They want to drive home. Democrats are going to be trying to drive home that Trump is not making good on his promises and that Democrats can do a better job. And they're hoping it will continue to pay off at the ballot box because it really did during the off-year elections.